All right. On that cheerful note, we're off topic already. So sometimes I am asked the question, what's fourth about this presentation? The answer to this next presentation is that it is a tradition of the Silicon Valley Fourth Interest Group, which makes it applicable in this case. We've been doing this for quite some time. Jack Woehr, formerly known as Jax, will now regale us with the year's exciting events in the exciting field of exciting quantum computing. I encourage you all to mute. So if you're not muted now, you should be, and I'm going to mute now.
I hope you can hear me now with my $4.65 Radio Shack headphones bought when they went out of business.
Those were the days. We can hear you fine.
Thank you. Yes, the relationship between fourth and the quantum computing presentation is the same philosophy of simplicity and directness still obtains in my personal praxis and in the praxis of a lot of people who are very seriously involved in this, that message of simplicity being, if not the only programming virtue, certainly the greatest programming virtue, informs the practice of Anselm Gelba of suckless.org and many programmers of the second and third generation. It becomes obvious if you think about it. So with no further ado, quantum computing in 2022. The picture is that of IBM's latest published chip. There are chips coming up the pipeline behind it, but this is the 127 qubit Eagle chip. And this is a very exciting development. They've broken the 100 qubit barrier. You will read many gee whiz scientific articles describing devices of various kinds and various architectures that claim beyond this 100 qubit barrier, but the only one that is out in public, usable, in this case, you have to make this particular chip, you have to make a partnership with IBM to get access to, but you can get access to it if it just takes money. This is the only public chip of the most reliable architecture that has yet been determined, which is the superconducting transmon qubit architecture pioneered by IBM, Google, and the Martinez Group of University of California at Santa Barbara. Let's see here. Okay, in this presentation, I would like to credit a few of the slides about the economics of quantum computing today and quantum computing in Africa to my friend Ferrari Majandu of Zimbabwe, currently working on his doctorate at Colorado School of Mines. And these slides are used by his permission. Ferrari is a very interesting fellow. He's in his 30s. He is pursuing his doctorate. He got his bachelor's quite a while ago and his master's, and over the years in South Africa. He was 9 years old before he saw a house wired for electricity. He comes from rural Zimbabwe, and he was fascinated by this. By the time he was 12, he was in school in the capital in Harare. His mother worked for a diplomat, and he got to go to school, and they showed him computers, and he was hooked. And he is a very, very sophisticated and very brilliant young fellow. And I knew him since 2019 via QuizKit Slack. He's a he's a QuizKit advocate like I am. And then in 2021, in the fall, he showed up in Golden, Colorado, going to Colorado School of Mines. And so we got to meet face to face and do many things together. And he's a jolly good fellow, and has a brilliant future ahead of him. He not only understands the technology, he is very, very aware of the placement of quantum computing, both in the economic scheme of things and also in the realm of the development of the continent of Africa. A very heavily produced sales presentation by IBM called the IBM Quantum State of the Union is actually extremely informative. It is worth watching. This is Dr. Jay Gambetta, who heads the IBM quantum computing effort. And it's a great video, and you should watch it. And they describe in great detail what they're doing and what their goals are and how they've achieved them without too much blather or gee whiz sales talk. Jay is a very brilliant, and he's kind of like a fourther. He tells people, he speaks in axioms. He says things like, you're still thinking too classically. He just tries to, with one sentence, change your frame of mind so you can understand quantum computing better, and he's worth listening to. On QuizKit Slack, where we all participate in developing quantum computing using IBM QuizKit, the open source Python toolkit that allows one to do quantum computing both in emulators and in real hardware in the cloud. There's about 24,000 accounts now on QuizKit Slack, and about a third to a half are from India. And that's an interesting story in itself. It's certainly the young grads and undergrads, grads, and postgrads of India have latched onto this. And there's a very vibrant meetup culture, meetup.com kind of culture in India for quantum computing. And I was interviewing, not interviewing, but having a conversation with a QuizKit. The QuizKit community managers pair those of us who are badged as QuizKit advocates by IBM together. Every week we have a meeting with one other member of the organization. I was talking to Samanve Sharma, who is a grad student in quantum computing and computer science. And I was talking to him, who I'd known for a while because I'd done a little presentation via Zoom for his university a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, about quantum computing. He had asked me to do that when he got excited. And so he was talking about how widespread the meetup culture is for quantum computing among the college students in India. And I said, well, how did that happen? He said, well, you advertised in QuizKit Slack a meetup via Zoom in 2019, and a few of us attended. And then you had another one. These were sponsored by DenHack, my maker space in Denver, denhac.org. He said, and then you had another few of them, and we started attending, and then we invited you to present at the university via Zoom, and then it just took off, and we just, the whole movement just spread throughout the colleges of India. And so it's one of those examples where you toss a stone in the water and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where the ripples are going to reach. It's very, it's very, very interesting to see how that grew out of just a couple of college students attending a few meetings. And now there's a huge, I don't know how much of this huge Indian presence on QuizKit Slack comes directly from that, but certainly a certain part of it does. Very interesting. David says, send me your slides for posting on the FIG website. And yes, I will have a link posted at the end of the slide presentation, and it will be a QR code. So if you have your cell phones ready, you will be able to link directly to this presentation via the QR code at the end of the presentation. It's the last slide. Moving away from IBM, IonQ seems to be doing very well. IonQ is associated, they do ion trap quantum computing, not superconducting transmon quantum computing. And they are associated, Honeywell is working with them, and the Honeywell guys wrote a backend, a provider, as they call it, for QuizKit. QuizKit has pluggable providers, so you can hook this huge computational library to any arbitrary quantum computing backend, a simulator, a real device, whatever. And the Honeywell guys wrote, and the IonQ guys together wrote a backend, a provider for IonQ. So you can talk, if you have a business relationship, and I will describe how you get that business relationship with IonQ in the cloud, you can talk to their devices with QuizKit as easily as you can talk to IBM devices. This QuizKit library is truly open source and supports the competitors of IBM as well as it supports IBM itself. It's an amazing effort in an amazing time in the history of computer science. In the field of photonic quantum computing, Xanadu is still around and accessible, and I will describe that in a minute when I discuss IonQ and the others. And then there's another company, Photonic, and I don't know much about them, but again, this idea that you can do quantum computing with light is very interesting. If I had been asked arbitrarily 10 years ago which approach I would think would be the most successful, I would have said photonic. And I do not understand the engineering enough to tell you why transmon quantum computing seems to be in the lead in terms of actually producing working devices, and I have no prediction about who is going to win the race or what technology is going to win the race for quantum computing. So I find this very interesting that photonic quantum computing is still there, and it's still a horse race between ion trap, photonic, and superconducting transmon-based quantum computing, as IBM and Google are doing, and to a large extent Microsoft, which depends still on transmon-based quantum computing and simulators. This presentation from 2021, which has not really been updated, they are still pursuing topological quantum computing, which is a very different approach, and to the best of my knowledge, still has not been proven to work. I do not know where they are with this, and I can't answer any questions about it. I'm very interested. Topological is the other approach that I find extremely interesting. It resembles, as I've discussed before, Isaac Asimov's positronic brain. It works by the creation and destruction of particles and antiparticles in pathways, just like Asimov said in 1950 that the robot brains worked by. One wonders if perhaps Asimov was from another time or another planet when one encounters these mysteries of his predictions of how the future would be and how true they turn out to be. Google seems to be focusing on the AI aspects of quantum computing. They're a little more mysterious, they don't quite announce what they're doing in terms of hardware quite as much. I suspect that IBM is winning the hardware race in superconducting transmon-based quantum computing, but one cannot be sure. In any case, they're both using the same approach, and what fascinates Google the most and what they are selling, how they are positioning themselves, is the use of quantum computing for AI. That is the field, of course, which is logical if you think about what Google does. They want to know everything you do or everything you ever thought in your life, and so they want to do AI. Haha. Anyway, And guess who else is there? Amazon, of course. Amazon takes over the world. Amazon, what they are doing is they are providing, as I said, we were going to discuss how you access IonQ and photonic. Amazon is providing the cloud infrastructure for allowing these services to be sold on the web. IBM has its own way of doing it. IBM has had quantum computing real devices up on the web for public access, free of charge for the smaller ones, since 2016. But in the past couple of years, Amazon has moved in and become the cloud host for hosting quantum computing services sold. There's actually revenue going on now, folks. This is not just scientists at play. Revenue is being generated, and Amazon is there. An Amazon bracket connects you with several different vendors' devices. I believe Rigetti is there, if I remember correctly. IonQ is there, et cetera, and on it goes. So Amazon is going to get their share of the loot. Whether they're not building any devices themselves, they're just hosting them. This is a slide from Ferrari, Majandu, and this is a selection of the companies that are producing software for quantum computing. This is not, the news last year when I spoke to you, I believe I emphasized the extent to which the larger companies were anticipating revenue. The news this year is how many companies there are that are anticipating revenue and getting capitalized to go out and pursue this field. Again, another slide from Ferrari. This is some of the smaller companies and the funding that they had received by February of 2021. And you see, this is moving into the billions of dollars now. Back to the science, which is I am not a financial advisor. I'm fascinated by this, but I'm more into the science of it. What I've been involved in is the effort to reach Open Chasm 3, a new level of quantum assembly language. Several things drove this. It's kind of an interesting story, and it's a story that you software hardware engineers will appreciate as we move away from the vagaries of the financial world, which if any of us understood it, we wouldn't be here. We'd be billionaires, and Chuck would be rich if we all understood this. But instead, we are engineers, and here we are back in engineering. Quantum computing has a gate model like an assembly language. The language that was promulgated as early as 2015, 2016 throughout the industry was a quantum assembly language called Open Chasm, QASM, which was basically, its approach was an outgrowth of research done at the Technische Universität at Wien in Vienna. And there was some, long before the devices were available, they were creating synthetic gate model quantum computing languages. And the seminal papers came from there. And this became a industry standard in about 2016, very loosely described and really only describing the gates. And it wasn't really a complete language. And there were several things missing from it: flow control, all kind, a lot of stuff that has been discovered that they can do with the gates since they first started actually making the devices and taking the open source approach, making them accessible, build it and they will come, making it accessible to the world, and succeeding in their effort in that they drew in so many thousands of brilliant young people who have started to perfect the quantum algorithms for them. They could build this hardware, but making it useful for the real world required open sourcing it and letting people play with these things and find what to do with them. So it has also stimulated the hardware research. And so Chasm 2 fell behind in terms of expressing what the gates could do, being a complete language for flow control. and being usable as a hardware language. They've actually want to use Open Chasm, tokenized, of course, to run the controllers that control the quantum computing devices, because the quantum computing devices really are quantum chips where a lot of the actual, hardware control is done with a classical computer that is outside the bin. And that's another discussion. So the one company has actually managed to put this inside the helium bath, so it doesn't have to come out from outside the helium bath and go through all kinds of things to keep the heat from promulgating and all that stuff. That's another story. But OpenChasm 3 is coming along. These are all links. When you get the presentation, you'll be able to click on them. OpenChasm 3, a broader and deeper quantum assembly language, is the seminal document. OpenChasm 3 live specification, we're actually working on it every week, perfecting the specification and clarifying, inventing a complete new programming language is non-trivial these days. A lot of facilities are expected in it. And the description of it in the seminal document above is very rich in suggestions and short on details. So the Open Chasm Technical Steering Committee is meeting, and there's an Antler grammar for it. And I was the mentor for a mentorship project with 3 brilliant young engineers who did a partial reference implementation without some of the hardware control, because we didn't have access to that. We were, outside that wall. But we did a reference implementation that works and generates code in QuizKit. And this technical steering committee is meeting week after week and working on this. And it's composed of people from AWS, Microsoft, IBM, and several other organizations. And I am currently the secretary of the Open Chasm TSC. I'm not a member, just a note taker and coordinator. And sometimes I have to ask them to slow down because a lot of this stuff flies right over my head, what they're talking about. Taking the notes can be quite difficult. And this article describes the technical steering committee and how they're going to keep this, not corporation specific, but industry-wide standard for quantum assembly language. In terms of the science, once again, one of the things that I said from the very beginning of when I got interested in quantum computing around 2008, 2009, I started looking at it around 2000, but I started writing about it for Dr. Dobbs in 2008, 2009, was that quantum computing was bound to revise our understanding of quantum mechanics itself. And I want to once again emphasize this paper, which I believe I mentioned before in my previous presentation, Catching and Reversing a Quantum Jump in Mid-Flight. We all have in the languages of all the developed world, we have the phrase quantum leap. They took a quantum leap in blue jeans or whatever. Quantum leaps seem to be instantaneous. You go from one energy level to another. Well, guess what? They're not instantaneous, and they kind of burble around a little bit before they hop. You can see that they're about to happen, and this was proven looking at quantum computing and how it actually worked. It used to be in universities that it took days to, you did several quantum mechanical experiments a year. Now a few billion are done every day. Every time you operate a gate in a quantum computer, you're doing a quantum mechanical experiment. So it really is changing the view of quantum mechanics, and this idea that something weird and spooky is happening that has no connection to the quotidian world that we experience is beginning to evaporate in quantum mechanics. They're beginning to see that our world is very coarse and composed of subcomponents of this, which is why our rules look a little different than theirs, but the rules are essentially understandable in the quantum mechanical world. And this paper that by Zlatko Minev of IBM, I guess the most brilliant guy in quantum mechanics that I have frequent access to. This guy's people say he's on the way to the Nobel Prize, and it may well be true. So it's worth reading, and it's not totally unintelligible, even if you have very small knowledge of quantum mechanics. And if you know any bright young grad students, guess what? Internships all over the world, any place you are in the world, there's quantum internships. So if anybody's considering a career in computer science or physics or something like that, or hard science, you might say, well, take a quantum computing internship, because even if you're working in microbiology, this is going to be there long before you retire, and it's going to be how you do things. So take that internship. See, I Googled quantum internships. That's all you have to do to find these things. And then this is truly an international effort. It's not just Europe and the Middle East and Asia. It's Africa too. And this is another slide from Ferrari Majadou. It's amazing how this is catching the brightest young minds all over the world. And as I talk to the young people, they say, the young people in QuizKit, I'm kind of an answer guy on QuizKit. It's not that I have the deepest answers, it's I have the most frequent answers. I make up for in volume what I lack in depth and clarity. I'm there to help them with QuizKit because I understand the code base. And so they all come to me and say, oh, you've been so helpful. I say, you're helping me. You present me with your code and I tell you what's broken in your code in terms of QuizKit and Python. But what I'm doing is I'm reading your code and saying, oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's how that algorithm works. Thank you, 20-year-old. You've just taught the old man a little more about quantum computing, which is having a great difficulty penetrating his brain. So I really appreciate being able to work with the brightest young minds from all over the planet. It's just the most amazing experience for me. It's keeping me young. And for us old guys, I want to remind you that quantum computing models the world in linear algebra, which is a perfect superset of Boolean algebra. And Boolean algebra transformed the human race's view of color, its sense of music, its sense of social relationships. It has transformed our world with those three little operators, and, or, and not. And now here comes quantum computing, which is a quantum computing gate is a unitary, and a unitary is a matrix multiplied by a vector, and it's going to do more transformation of the world than digital binary computing did. So hold on to your seats, put on your seatbelt, and extinguish your cigarettes and get ready for the ride. So thank you very much, Fourth Interest Group. You made me what I am today, and I appreciate it very much. And I'm hoping everybody's well and happy, and that Ting does well, whatever he's going through right now. And it's been a pleasure to address you all. And here is the QR code. I will send David Jaffe the link to this. And but in any case, if you have your cell phones ready, you can snap that QR code and you can have this presentation instantly on your phone. That is the link. And tell me if it doesn't work. I think I did it right. Google Slides can defeat me from time to time. Thank you very much for your attention. I will return control of your television set to everybody else.
Thank you for your talk.
Don't everybody talk at once now.
Would you be willing to put the link from the last slide into the chat as well?
Certainly, just a second here. Let me get the chat box up, type message here to everyone. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You got that, David, or should I mail it to you still? Is that good? Somebody click that and make sure it works.
Yeah, let me just
works.
copy. Let me just copy it
Thank you.
and make
Thank
sure I
you.
can copy it. Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Very good. Lots of fun links there.
PDF
Start your-
download in progress.
In the sixties, and we had the post-civil rights efforts in the 70s, 80s, but it seems as if not until George Floyd was murdered did some people in the corporate world, the government take seriously discrimination and other challenges that African Americans face. Is it your perception that George Floyd had an incredible impact more than
Somebody's got a radio or TV on or something in the background. So,
we were all as a country? And secondly, this was fully video.
And where did Kevin take off to?
he's back, but he's silent.
I mean, he's not back.
Here he is. And I gotta say, Dennis's beard is really getting amazing. There he is. Hi, Dennis.
Hello.
I'm a guy who appreciates beards. Dennis has a great beard.
You just have to put up with